All right, I'm happy to introduce you to today's speaker, Elaine Mills. Elaine is a member of the class of 2012, whose primary interest is in sustainable gardening. She created the first set of fact sheets on tried and true native plants that are now a popular resource on our website. She has spent 8 years photographing native plants in public and private gardens and enjoys selecting pictures from her photo library to illustrate her talks, articles, and weekly educational posts for our group on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. In addition, she serves as one of the coordinators for the Glen Carlin Demonstration Garden in Arlington. And you will get to see many of Elaine's wonderful pictures in today's presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Elaine.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Welcome, everyone. Today's presentation is the second in our Best Bet series. Last month, I spoke about native plants for wet conditions, and today we'll be talking about native plants for dry conditions. To give you an overview, first of all, I'll talk about some of the causes of dry garden conditions and discuss some adaptations that plants have made to those conditions. I'll briefly discuss some benefits of using native plants particularly, and explain how you can use the fact sheets that Leslie referred to, the tried and true fact sheets, to help you make selections that you might enjoy adding to your own personal garden. Then I'll introduce the Best Bets plants, and those will include 6 trees, 4 shrubs, 6 perennials, 4 ground covers, and 4 grasses and sedges. And we'll conclude with some information on resources. First off, causes for dry conditions in a garden. Initially, this can have to do with the effects of climate and the seasons. For example, the summer season is generally drier than, say, spring. But I've particularly been noticing the effects of climate change, especially the advent of these stagnant weather patterns. We've been experiencing this locally with a long stretch of dry days with no rain. You also will take into effect the urban heat effect. This is caused just by the buildup of buildings, impermeable surfaces like roads, driveways, and sidewalks that allow heat to build up. The texture and structure of your soil can bring about dry conditions or wet conditions. Sandy soil will be drier than clay soil, for example. The alignment of your home in relation to the sun and wind direction can affect the moisture in your garden, as well as topography and water flow. And there are microclimates within a landscape that are warmer and or drier. Some examples are slopes. The top of a slope will be drier than the bottom, and south-facing exposure exaggerates that drying effect. Areas exposed to prevailing winds are affected. I know in our Glen Carlin garden nursery, some plants in pots were really dried out with a long period of wind. Proximity to reflective and impervious surfaces, such as walls and the sides of buildings. Soil at the base of the south side of a building or wall can be dry, as well as the soil at the base of a north wall and areas under large trees. Here are some plant adaptations to dry conditions. Trees can have thick bark. Some succulent plants have special structures for holding water, storing water, and some of them will even put out thorns to ward off any animals that might want to take advantage of the moisture in those leaves. Some other plants will reduce their leaf surfaces to avoid the amount of water that's evaporating. And they'll do that by having narrow leaves, folded leaves, or lobed leaves. Other plants have hairy leaves that help to insulate them either from heat or cold. Yet other plants will have a rosette arrangement of their leaves. This allows any rain that falls or any dewdrops that accumulate in the leaves to be funneled down toward the center and then to the roots. Some plants will have dense basal growth that helps to shade the roots, and others, particularly the grasses, will have very deep roots, some of them even going to 10 or 12 feet deep into the soil. A final category of plants makes use of crassulacean acid metabolism. That long-winded term refers to a mode that these plants use. They photosynthesize during the day, but their stomata, the openings in the leaves, will be closed at that time, and they will only open at night to permit the gas exchange, the taking in of carbon dioxide and the release of oxygen. Master gardeners have a mantra, right plant, right place. And this means that we urge you to match a plant's light and moisture requirements to the sun exposure and soil conditions that already exist in your garden. So the plants we'll be talking about today will be plants that are adapted to drier, well-drained sites, plants that can tolerate local rain shortages. Most of them are going to thrive in sun and heat. I'll be pointing out those that would prefer partial sun or even shade. Some grow well in exposed areas or on slopes, and some actually prefer dry shade. There are benefits of using native plants. That's why we're recommending them as our best bets. First of all, they're suited to our local soil and climate conditions. That means that once they become established, they're not going to need inputs of chemicals, herbicides, and pesticides. Very importantly, native plants have evolved with our local fauna, so they can provide nectar and pollen for our pollinators, and they can serve as host plants for Lepidoptera. That means that the plants will provide nectar for the adults, but the leaves of those same plants can be used as nourishment for the caterpillar stage of Lepidoptera. And the term Lepidoptera refers to butterflies and moths. Moths are the most prevalent category, and butterflies are distinguished by having antennae that are thread-like with little knobs at the end. The moths have rather feathery antennae in general. There are some small subcategories of butterflies. The fritillaries are butterflies that have a checkered pattern on their wings, and skippers are small butterflies that have knobs with little hooks at the ends. Native plants also provide fruit and seeds for wildlife, and they offer cover for a variety of animals. Along with the link to our Zoom presentation today, you should have received a link to this fact sheet. It's the tried and true native plants best bets for dry conditions. This lists all the plants that I will be discussing today. This is your handout. And if you want to get additional information on any particular plant, you can follow a link. For example, if you wanted to learn more about purple coneflower, it would take you to this tried and true fact sheet. It provides information on height, spread, bloom color, many characteristics, and lots of growing and maintenance tips. So this chart, these fact sheets, will summarize the points that I'm going to be making today. So you really won't need to be taking lots of notes. You can always go back and refer to these fact sheets for all the details. And many of the fact sheets on the MGNV website will have beautiful accompanying videos made by my colleague Mary Free that shows pollinators in action. Nicole, do we have any questions at this early point in the presentation?
Oh, well, we have one that just came in right now. Are there any plants that can survive shade from the north side of a building, plus a tree to the west and an overhang, keeping the area dry?
Okay, let's talk about that when we get a little further down the line, talking about shade. And for very specific conditions like this, sometimes I don't have a chance to answer a question fully during the live presentation, but I go back and I review all of the questions that are placed in the chat box. And when this presentation is, when the recording of the presentation is posted on our MGNV website, I will go into a lot more detail for very specific questions like that. Okay, let's continue then, and we'll be talking about our best bets plants, and we're starting with the trees. The first is white oak, Quercus alba, a majestic deciduous tree. It has a massive trunk and strong horizontal branches. This is a slow-growing, long-lived tree. It has a very deep taproot, one of those with a deep root, taking advantage of being able to reach down into the soil for moisture. It grows in sun and dry conditions. In fact, most of the plants will require those conditions. So I won't necessarily be mentioning that for every plant. I'll only point out the differences. This one tolerates black walnut, clay, and dry soil, but is intolerant of flooding. So some of the oak trees have really been distressed when there have been heavy rain events and their roots were held in soggy soil. White oak provides food, cover, and nesting sites for our wildlife and is the larval host for an amazing 534 Lepidoptera species. This earns it the award of keystone species. Entomologist Doug Tallamy, who has written widely about native plants and their benefit for wildlife, designate certain plants as keystone species if they provide that support to the caterpillar stage of Lepidoptera. This is important because these caterpillars themselves are going to be the primary food for our birds. So this tree will support not only the Lepidoptera, but our bird populations as well. White oak has 4-season interests. You'll see the flowers in March to May. It has leaves with those lobed surfaces to help them withstand the dry conditions. It has acorns with bumpy caps and very attractive red fall foliage. It will turn brown eventually, but the fall foliage actually lingers on the trees through the winter. Some planting and care tips. And first, I'd like to mention that it has white and gray scaly bark. You'll want to leave adequate room for this large tree and plant it when young to accommodate the roots. This tree requires rich acidic soil, well drained, as I mentioned, to avoid that root rot. And it's preferable to mulch all the way to the drip line. That's the outer ends of the branches. And this will eliminate compaction and competition with grass. Trees prefer more acidic soil. Grass prefers more alkaline soil. And when the trees are young, you'll want to protect them from deer. White oak can be used as an ornamental lawn tree in large landscapes or a forest canopy tree. Our next tree is Eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana. This has a columnar shape to it. It's an evergreen conifer, another long-lived tree. This one grows at a medium rate with the same sun and moisture conditions preferred. This one tolerates many different urban conditions, but again is intolerant of wet soil. Deer will rarely damage it severely. This is the best drought tolerant of these trees native to the East Coast. And it provides food and cover for our wildlife. Another tree with 4-season interest. It has beautiful, dense, scale-like dark foliage and silvery bark. In the spring, you'll see its flowers. The female flowers are pale blue and the male flowers are reddish brown. And the pollinated female flowers will produce cone-like or actually berry-like fruits on female plants. Some planting and care tips. This tree is easy to transplant when it's small, although it will eventually develop deep roots. And it's tolerant of a wide range of soil types and pH. You'll want to plant this tree away from the alternate hosts of cedar apple rust, a disease that attacks rose family plants. And examples of those would be serviceberry, quince, and crab apple. This particular tree can be used either as a tall specimen or planted in groups as a screen. Moving into shorter stature trees, Sassafras albidum is a deciduous understory tree. It has an irregular trunk. Mine is actually rather crooked, the one I have in my garden, and it has a flat-topped crown. Again, sun and dry conditions are preferred, although as an understory, this one can take some partial shade. It tolerates clay soil and drought, and you need to be alert that deer may browse twigs and foliage. This is a larval host plant for a variety of Lepidoptera. Sassafras has lovely spring flowers. There will be separate flowers on the male and female plants. This is a dioecious tree. The female trees will have fall fruit, and all of the trees have aromatic bark. This particular tree is interesting because it has three distinct leaf shapes: these rounded leaves, mitten-shaped leaves, and leaves with multiple lobes, and all of them turn bright colors in the fall. As far as planting and care, this one you need to be very careful when transplanting due to the large taproot. It can spread and colonize through suckering. So you would want to remove those suckers if you wanted this to grow with a single trunk, or you could allow the plant to colonize. So it could be used as a single trunk lawn tree or grown as a screen in a naturalized planting in spacious areas. Our next tree, Eastern hop hornbeam, Ostreus virginiana, another deciduous understory tree. It's slow growing and adaptable, and actually prefers part shade to full shade, although dry to moist conditions. It's very tolerant of many conditions, including clay and rocky dry soil, but intolerant of flooding and salt, and it's moderately deer resistant. This particular tree attracts the downy woodpecker and purple finch, and it's a possible larval host plant. Another tree with multi-season interest. It begins in the spring with these attractive catkins, and then this distinctive fruit resembling hops develops in the summer. It has serrated leaves that will turn yellow in the fall, and all year long you will notice this interesting exfoliating bark. This particular tree is one that should actually be planted in the early spring. Most trees do quite well when they're planted in the fall, but this one, it does best in the spring, and you'll want to mulch and water it until it's established. It's resistant to many urban stresses, except for de-icing salt. You can use this as an ornamental tree or in a woodland garden. Our next tree, moving down in size, is cockspur hawthorn, Crataegus cruz-galli, a small rounded tree, only about 20 feet tall or so. This one has a short trunk and branches that move out horizontally. This one prefers full sun and dry conditions. It tolerates drought and pollution, and just be aware that deer may browse the twigs and the leaves. It's very supportive of wildlife, attracting bees to the nectar and songbirds for cover, nesting materials, and fruit. And it's also a larval host plant for multiple butterflies. Another plant with four-season interest, as you saw in that lead photograph, it has a beautiful display of spring flowers. Then in the summer, the fruit will appear. It begins green and then turns this brilliant orange-red. And the so-called haws will persist through the winter. This photo was taken in February. Be alert, this tree has thorny branches, and it has very attractive exfoliating bark. You'll want to site this tree carefully on your property due to the thorns, and also plant it away from cedar trees to prevent that cedar apple rust. You can use it as an ornamental accent, as shown here in this garden, or you can allow it to sucker and form a thicket or a barrier hedge with its thorns. And you'll want to prune it in winter or early spring. It will blossom on new branches. Our next tree is downy serviceberry, Amelanchier arborea. This is another deciduous understory tree, about 15 to 25 feet high. It's quite often a multi-stemmed specimen. It can grow in either sun or part shade, and it tolerates clay, dry soil, and pollution. And deer seldom will severely damage it. It's a wonderful early nectar source for native bees, eventually will produce berries for birds, and the foliage serves as food for a variety of Lepidoptera. Another tree with four-season interest, it begins in the early spring with these nectar-rich flowers. And here's the fruit, can be enjoyed by all of us as well as by wildlife. Has a brilliant fall color, and throughout the year, you'll notice this lovely dappled bark. This is another tree that you will want to avoid planting near either the eastern red cedar tree or the prostrate junipers used as ground covers. This is what it looks like when the cedar apple rust attacks the plant. It forms this very unappealing growth on the fruit. Now, this growth will not kill the tree, but it just makes the fruit very unappetizing. You'll want to plant downy serviceberry in the sun for most prolific flowering and fruiting. And you can remove root suckers to allow for greater growth. This one has been used in my neighborhood as a street tree. Because of its small size, it would be very lovely beside patios and also attractive in woodland gardens. Now we'll take a look at our best bets shrubs. The first is mountain laurel, Kalmia latifolia. It's a tall evergreen shrub, ranging in height from 5 to 20 feet tall. And it's really one of the most beautiful of our native flowering shrubs. This one prefers part shade and dry, specifically acidic soil. It tolerates rocky soil, but not clay, and deer will occasionally damage it. It provides nectar and pollen to our native bees and will offer fruit to songbirds and small mammals. Mountain laurel has clusters of cup-shaped flowers in May, and these are very interesting. The point at which the stamens are attached, you can see each of those pinkish red points. Those are spring-loaded, and when an insect lands, those will be released and they will powder the insect with pollen that can then be carried on to another flower. Mountain laurel has shiny evergreen leaves and reddish brown bark on short, crooked trunks. This particular shrub does best in morning sun or dappled sun in open woods. And as I mentioned, it requires a soil pH on the low end, 4.5 to 6. Most plants prefer soil in the so-called neutral range, around 6 to 7. Because of its preference for acidic soil, it will complement rhododendrons and azaleas. And you'll want to use pine bark to amend the surrounding soil and to use as mulch. This can be used as a foundation plant, as a hedge, and at the back of shaded shrub borders or as understory plant in woodland gardens. Our next shrub is black haw, Viburnum prunifolium. This is the tallest of the native viburnums, reaching 12 to 15 height, almost small tree height. It either comes as a single trunk or multi-stemmed. Here it has a single trunk and looks almost like a tree. It can grow in either sun or part shade and tolerates drought and pollution. Be aware that deer may browse the twigs and the foliage. This one provides lots of wildlife support. The flowers will serve myriad bees and butterflies, and the fruit attracts birds and small mammals. It's also a larval host to various moths. It begins with lovely flowers in April to May. These actually finished in my garden, blooming at the end of April. Lovely white clusters of flowers. Then you'll see this fall fruit. It begins green, turns red, and then this dark blue set against brilliant fall foliage. And its branches provide shelter to birds. As far as planting and care, this is one of the most drought tolerant of the native viburnums. It's adaptable to soil type and pH, but it will not flower in deep shade. You'll want to prune this immediately after flowering because the next year's flower buds are going to form on old wood in the summer. You can use this as a lovely specimen plant. Our next shrub is Eastern or common ninebark, Physocarpus opulifolius. This is a fountaining deciduous shrub ranging in height from 3 to 10 feet high. It's multi-stemmed and rounded with graceful arching branches. It can grow in either sun or part shade, and it tolerates clay, drought, and erosion, and deer will rarely severely damage it. It attracts numerous pollinators to the flowers, and the birds will come for the fruit. Another plant with four-season interest. This is what the flowers look like right now in my garden, very showy clusters, maybe about 2 inches across. It has very attractive lobed leaves. Right now they're a lighter yellow-green, and they will turn darker. And then this is what the different color variation will be. There are many cultivars of this plant, many named cultivars, and the foliage can range from gold, orange, rust-colored, even reddish purple. This is what the seed capsules look like, and they will remain through the winter, and the exfoliating bark will be attractive then as well. This is a plant that's very easily grown and resilient. You'll want to prune it as needed directly after blooming and remove any old canes of established plants at the base in late winter. This is a plant I accidentally did not choose a very good site for it initially, and it really outgrew that location. I was very lucky that I was able to dig it up and actually transplant it to another site, and it has continued on doing quite well in a more spacious location. You can use this as a specimen plant or as a hedge. Now, we're coming to common yucca, and this is the only plant I will be discussing that has no separate fact sheet. This one, believe it or not, grows. It's native to this area. It has rather a southwestern desert look to it, but it is native to the East Coast. And interestingly, it is a shrub. It is what's referred to as a stemless shrub. The stem is actually underneath the ground, and this one is evergreen. It begins 3 feet tall and then will reach a maximum height of 6 feet. This one prefers full sun and well-drained soil, and it tolerates drought, pollution, sandy or rocky soil, and even salt spray. Very intolerant of wet soil, the roots will rot. It's resistant to rabbits and deer. Another great support plant for our wildlife. Hummingbirds will seek the nectar. It's a host plant for skipper butterflies, and it has a mutualistic relationship with the yucca moth. Common yucca has a basal rosette of sword-like leaves. It's the example of the plant that I showed that will funnel the moisture from either dew or rain down to the roots. And the edges of those sword-like leaves have these interesting filaments. The rosette is about 3 feet in height, and then the plant will send up this tall flower stalk in June with beautiful waxy white flowers. And then seed pods will develop later. You'll want to plant this away from high traffic areas due to the sharpness of the edges of its leaves, and also allow for its extensive root system. As you can see from this photo, small colonies can form from basal offsets. Now, I mentioned that it does tend to prefer full sun, but it can actually tolerate part shade, as shown in this lovely photo. This was taken in North Carolina Arboretum. As far as care, you'll want to cut away any dead leaves in the spring and prune the flower stalk clear down to the ground. That will send up again new, full 6 feet high in the new growing season. And you'll want to wear gloves to protect your hands when working around this plant. It can be grown on dry slopes or in large containers. It's also suitable, as I mentioned, because of its its salt tolerance in seaside gardens or areas locally which receive road salt runoff. Here's a lovely photo showing that plant in a meadowlark mixed perennial bed. Nicole, do we have any more questions at this point?
We sure do, Elaine. We have a bunch.
Okay.
So our first one is, how and for how long do you protect saplings from deer?
Um, I would think it's really going to take a couple of years. I found that when I put in shrubs, it wasn't deer, but rabbits that were attacking the shrubs. Unbelievably, they would, even a shrub that had long, thin, 4-foot tall branches, they would nip them off at the base, and that was very destructive. And I found that I needed to use a chicken wire surround for a couple of years. Once the diameter of the stems or the trunks of the trees becomes thicker, that will be more protective, certainly against rabbits. Now, deer, because of their taller height, can reach up and nibble the branches. So I would think if deer are a problem, that you would want to be providing protection really for several years.
Okay, thank you. The next question is about the perennials and ground cover that are mentioned in the fact sheet. Are those deer resistant, or are they possibly attractive to other wildlife? It seems the questioner has had some issues with wildlife nibbling at the perennials and ground cover.
Okay, we'll be getting to those categories of plants next. And if you follow the links from the handout fact sheet, the best bets fact sheet, to the individual tried and true fact sheets, we go to a lot of trouble to mention which plants are resistant to rabbits, which plants are resistant to deer, and which plants attract which wildlife, and as far as fruit and seeds and cover, as well as which plants offer either nectar or pollen to the pollinators. So the fact sheets are the ultimate place to go to get all of those details.
Okay. The next question is about whether there's a good reference that you could suggest for tree identification, especially one that's in a decision tree format.
That's a question that I would like to respond to when I answer other chat box questions. I will be providing what I refer to as an addendum, and that will be posted on the website. I haven't had to particularly identify a lot of trees myself, so I'd like to be able to offer some good suggestions for that.
Okay. And then someone else is wondering about a source for female red cedars. It seems they've called a few local nurseries and all they have are male red cedars.
Okay, I'm not sure which nurseries have been contacted. At the end of the talk, under resources, I'll be referring to some native only plant sellers. And those plant sellers would be perhaps more careful than some of the larger commercial nurseries to designate whether a plant is male or female. So I'll be mentioning that at the very end of the talk.
Next question is about serviceberry and whether you can talk a little bit about the differences among them. Some of the ones mentioned in the question were Allegheny, Canada, and Downey, which I think was in your slides. And specifically, if there's one that's better for wet conditions than some of the others.
Since I focused on this one particular serviceberry, that's another question that I would like to research a little more thoroughly, and then I can provide more details.
Okay. Another one is about the distance between red cedar and a serviceberry shrub, and the distance between red cedar and apple trees. What's the best distance to prevent rust rot and etc.?
I will provide more details in that addendum document, but my understanding is even a, a space of many yards can allow this disease to be carried. So if you already have one or the other of those categories of plants in your garden, you may not be safe adding a plant from the other type. So if you have a cedar, it may not work for you to plant, let's say, the serviceberry. Or if you have a crabapple, you might not want to plant anything in that juniper cedar group.
Mhm. Okay. The next question is about the safety of planting some of the smaller trees near a house that's on a slab. I guess the concern is about roots brushing up against the house.
Right. We, in in our presentations on sustainable landscaping, there is one general presentation that we have given by our lead on public education, Amy Crumpton, which gives really good information about the spacing that should be allowed between trees and shrubs and the foundations of our homes, as well as concern about any overhanging wires. My understanding is you're going to want to have, oh, it's probably at least 10 or 15 feet, maybe even 20 feet, depending on the eventual size of the tree, between where you plant that tree and your foundation. And that particular recording gives really excellent information about that spacing. I'll try to add that information in the addendum as well.
Great. Thanks, Elaine. Just a couple more, or a few more, sorry. Are any of the plants discussed better for growing underneath an oak, or are there ones particularly to avoid planting under an oak? And the questioner is not sure of the type of oak that they have.
Okay. My understanding is that oaks are maybe a little particular about some of the plants that are grown underneath them. I know there are some sedges, and I'm not particularly talking about oak sedge today. I will be talking about another sedge, Pennsylvania sedge. Some of those lower growing plants are maybe the best ones to plant underneath. And I will try to look a little further into the range of plants that could be included and add that in my discussion.
We have a question about black haw pruning, and if you prune it right after flowering, excuse me, will you remove the developing fruit?
That would be true. I guess I was just mentioning that in case you felt that the tree was in, or your shrub, I've referred to it as a shrub here, that it was in need of pruning. It it won't necessarily need pruning every year, and therefore you could allow it to continue retaining the flowers, or you might just prune certain branches, retaining other branches that would in fact have the flowers and develop the fruit.
We have a question about the yucca that we just discussed, and how extensively will it spread? And then a question about the root system as well. And if you need to move it, how difficult will it be to move the plant?
We have moved the plant successfully at Glencarlin Garden. We've actually had some of these basal offsets. The smaller ones are very easy to move, but we've even had success with the plants that were maybe 2 or 3 feet across.
Okay, and then, and the spread would be about 2 feet across generally, or could it grow wider?
I guess if you retained all of the offsets, that entire root system could be broader. As you're seeing in this photo here, some of these plants may have had offsets one from the other. And so that root system could be extensive.
Okay, okay. See, we have a question here about broadleaf herbicides along a fence line with the neighbor. Her crepe myrtles are not doing well, and she's hoping shrubs will be more resistant to the herbicides used. Are these shrubs resistant to the sprays?
Well, I am certainly an advocate myself of not using any of these sprays. They are very damaging to our pollinators. Um, and I'll have to respond in the chat to that. Now, the particular plant that was mentioned was crepe myrtles. Is that correct?
Well, it seems like she wants to replace crepe myrtle with a shrub. She's
Oh,
hoping
with replace them with a native shrub. Okay. Well, the problem with a neighbor's use of herbicides, especially if they're not careful about when and how they're using them, that spray could be airborne and carried, and that could be problematic. The questioner may want to talk with the neighbor about the perceived need for the use of those herbicides, see if they can work something out.
And then just one more question. Should we assume black walnuts damage all plants unless mentioned specifically in presentation or on the fact sheets?
There are some excellent websites that list the plants that are affected and that are not affected by black walnut. We go out of our way to mention the ones that we know are not affected by black walnut, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the others would be. I have included references to this website in some of the other addenda that I have prepared for other presentations, and I will repeat that in the document that will be posted on the website for this presentation as well.
Okay. And that's all the questions we have for right now, Elaine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. We'll move on. All right, we'll start looking at perennials, which some questions were raised about. The first is hyssop leaf thoroughwort, Eupatorium hyssopifolium. This is an upright, clumping, single-stemmed plant, about 2 to 4 feet tall, and it grows in sun to part shade. It's going to prefer sandy, well-drained soil and tolerates dry sites, drought, and even salt. It's pest resistant and unpalatable to deer. This one attracts numerous pollinators and other beneficial insects, including predators, predatory wasps. And it provides seed for birds. It begins growth with these basal leaves and then will send up these sparsely branched stems that have whorled leaves. The flowers are disc flowers, and they appear in flat-topped clusters, and they bloom from July to October. Here's a look at a wasp that serves as both a pollinator and a predator of unwanted pest insects in your garden. I've been learning that this is a recommended plant as an underused garden gem. It spreads by rhizomes, and you need to be aware that those heavy flower-laden stems may flop. One thing that I do with plants that grow tall and may tend to flop is that I pinch them back at several times during the growing season. You can do this up to about the 4th of July. One of my favorite reference books that talks about this kind of pinching back or pruning technique is The Well-Tended Perennial Garden by Tracy DeSabato-Ost. And perhaps Julie may be able to post the information on that in the chat box, and I'll be sure to include that in my reference materials that are posted with the recording. This is a plant you'll want to retain for winter interest of those interesting seed heads, and then you'll cut it back in the late winter. You can use it en masse in naturalistic settings like dry meadows, sunny slopes, hell strips, and even the seashore. And it's especially effective, as shown here, when it's massed with grasses and colorful native wildflowers. Our next perennial is blue wild indigo, Baptisia australis. Now, this is a perennial, but it really has, because of its large size, a shrub-like habit. It's a multi-stemmed plant that reaches about 3 to even 5 feet in height, likes full sun to part shade, and it tolerates a range of conditions and is deer resistant. It attracts bumblebees particularly. They are strong enough to pry apart the lips of those tubular flowers, and its leaves provide sustenance for some Lepidoptera. It has these lovely purplish flower spikes in May. Mine have just finished blooming, and these are attractive to bees and butterflies alike. It has these interesting trifoliate leaves. I mentioned that those are a larval host for Lepidoptera. And then the seed pods will develop in June and eventually turn dark in the fall. This is a plant that does not transplant easily due to its deep taproot, but if you site it very carefully, it will be a long-lived plant in your garden. Because of its large size, you'll want to space the young plants about 3 feet apart. Now, there's an interesting saying with regard to plants. The plants in their first year will sleep, in their second year, they'll creep, and in their third year, they will leap. They'll really take off. And that's because a lot of the young plants will want to put their energy into the root growth, and they'll only really begin flowering more profusely in the second or the third year. This one you might want to trim after it blooms to avert the need to stake it. Some of the heavy storm events that we're experiencing may batter it down, but if you do that, you won't have the seed pods. And please note, this is intolerant of soggy winter soil. You can use this either individually as a specimen plant, or you could use it in small groups at the back of borders. Purple coneflower, Echinacea purpurea, is not locally native. It's a native to the Midwest, but it does so well here that we really consider it one of our best bets plants. It's a tall, upright perennial, about 2 to 4 feet tall, in sun to part shade. And it tolerates our summer heat and humidity, but not waterlogging. Deer will occasionally severely damage this plant. Provides lots of wildlife support. Pollen and nectar are offered to beneficial insects, and goldfinches particularly are attracted to the seeds that form from that central cone, and it may be a possible larval host. The flowers bloom from June to August. They are composite flowers with a very prominent disc flowers in that central cone, and then the ray flowers, those colored petals surrounding it. And the goldfinches will be attracted to these flower cones. Very attractive in winter as well. Established plants can endure some drought, but you'll want to watch for wilting. And as I mentioned, prevent excess soil moisture in winter so that root rot diseases won't form. You can deadhead the plant to extend the bloom season, but then you'll be doing away with the seeds that are desirable for the goldfinches. And you can divide the clumps as they get larger when they become overly crowded every 4 years. This plant can be used in borders or meadows, or as shown here at the outer edge of rain gardens. I'd like to make a special note about this plant. Purple coneflower, more than any other native plant, has many cultivars that have been developed. And you'll want to avoid the cultivars that are missing this large central cone that's seen in the straight species. In this cutaway of the straight species, you can see the up at the top here, these are the nectaries where nectar can be obtained, and the pollen is formed here as well. But in the double flowered plants like these, the extra petals are going to replace the functioning nectaries and therefore prevent seed production. Here's a look at the cutaway of that. This is essentially a sterile flower. It's not going to provide any nectar, any pollen, or any seeds. And in pollinator trials that were performed at Mount Cuba, this plant, these double-flowered cultivars did not do well as far as attracting pollinators. Our next perennial is Black-Eyed Susan, Rudbeckia hirta. This is a short-lived plant, about 1 to 3 feet tall. It tolerates heat, drought, and even clay soil, although it prefers the soil to be well drained. It's intolerant of wet soil. And this one is deer resistant. It provides a lot of wildlife support, attracting many pollinators and birds, especially goldfinches. And it's the larval host to the silvery checker spot butterfly. This is a biennial plant. That means that it's going to bloom every other year. It blooms through the summer months, and then it will die back. But because it freely self-seeds, it will replenish that colony. So you won't really be aware of individual plants dying back. You can deadhead it to encourage rebloom or to control the spread. And it's especially effective when planted en masse. You can use it in borders and meadows. Our next perennial is threadleaf coreopsis, Coreopsis verticillata. This grows in dense bushy clumps, and they can range in height anywhere from 6 inches to 3 feet tall. It can grow in either sun or part shade and prefers well-drained soil. Deer will rarely damage it. And it attracts butterflies and other pollinators. It gets its name because of this fine textured foliage, thread-like leaves that grow in whorls. And the flowers will grow in loose clusters. This is really a long blooming plant. It starts in late spring and will carry through to late summer. Here's an example of a very desirable cultivar, the moonbeam cultivar. This plant is excellent for areas with poor dry soil, especially what we refer to as the hell strips, those really hot, dry areas that are curbside. In fact, it will tend to flop if it's planted in moist, rich soil. You can deadhead it for continuous bloom and actually shear it off with your clippers in midsummer for fall rebloom. It spreads both by rhizomes and reseeding and can be divided every couple of years. A great plant to use in borders, a cutting garden, in meadows, or containers. Our next perennial is butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. This is the shortest of the native butterfly, excuse me, the native Asclepias plants, the milkweeds that are supportive of our monarch butterflies. This particular one is the shortest. It grows 1 to 3 feet tall and prefers dry, well-drained soil. It attracts many pollinators and hummingbirds and is the larval host for the monarch butterfly. In other words, this single plant will provide for the entire life cycle of the monarch. It offers nectar to the male and female adults, and then the females will come, they will lay their eggs on the undersides of the leaves. They will develop into the caterpillars that then will come out and feed. So this plant is a great substitute for butterfly bush, a non-native, in fact, invasive plant in our area, which provides only nectar for the adult butterflies. Butterfly weed has very showy flowers from June to August, and they are set off against lance-shaped leaves on hairy stems. And many people are familiar, of course, with these spindle-shaped seed follicles, and those airy seeds will be carried on the air when the follicles split open, allowing it to spread. This is a plant that has a very deep taproot, so you're going to want to plant it when young and avoid transplanting it. Another one where the flowers won't really appear until it's better established on 2 to 3-year-old plants. This is important, especially if you want to consider this a support plant for your monarchs. You'll want to retain any dead foliage or flowers until after frost, because they may harbor eggs or the caterpillar larvae of monarchs. You can use this in borders, in meadows, or in butterfly gardens. Now we'll turn to some ground covers. The first is fragrant sumac, Rhus aromatica grow low. This is actually a woody plant, a dense deciduous shrub, but it's fairly short, reaching only 8 to 36 inches high. It's multi-stemmed and it has long recumbent spreading branches that can actually reach 6 to 8 feet across. It grows in sun to part shade and prefers well-drained soil, although it will tolerate clay soil. It will offer fruit for birds into the winter months. These are the glossy trifoliate leaves, and some people are concerned that it looks rather like poison ivy. Although they're both in the same genus, the Rhus genus, this particular plant is totally non-toxic. This is what the flowers look like in April, and then when they're pollinated, they will form this fruit, this fuzzy fruit that continues on into the winter. And this plant is especially attractive because of its brilliant fall foliage. The leaves and the twigs are aromatic, hence the species name, aromatica. This plant is a very vigorous grower, and it does well in our disturbed urban soils, in bare soil and even the hell strips. It's very adaptable to soil pH, and it can spread both by suckering from the base, from the roots, or what's referred to as tip layering, when the ends of branches may touch down on the soil and then re-root. And this particular plant has multiple landscape uses. One of my Master Gardener colleagues uses it as a foundation planting, another as a ground cover under trees and shrubs. I've recommended this plant for hell strips in a church parking lot for erosion control. And I've seen it also used as a low hedge. This is at Green Spring Gardens locally. Another lovely ground cover is white wood aster, Eurybia divaricata. This is a loose clumping herbaceous plant ranging from 6 to 36 inches high. Now this one, unlike some of the preceding ones, grows in part shade to full shade in dry conditions. It can tolerate shallow soil, drought, and dense shade, and is deer resistant. Butterflies will be attracted to the flowers, and juncos and goldfinches will enjoy the seeds that form. It begins with heart-shaped basal leaves, and then will send up zigzag-like stems with lance-shaped leaves. It has abundant fall flowers in flat-top clusters, and these are a very important late nectar source for our pollinators. This is what the seed heads look like in October. This plant is very easy to grow and maintain, and be alert, it will spread vigorously, both via rhizomes and seeds, but it's fairly shallowly rooted, and in my estimation, it's quite easy to pick up the sections of plants that you don't want and control it. You'll want to provide good air circulation and morning sun to prevent foliar diseases. You can use this in woodland gardens or on shady slopes to control erosion. And it's also a very attractive edging for paths. I use it as a ground cover under shrubs in a woodland area. Now, another plant like the yucca that doesn't appear to belong on our East Coast, but it does. This is the Eastern prickly pear, Opuntia humifusa. This is a clump-forming perennial cactus about 6 to 12 inches high. This is one that's definitely going to prefer full sun, and very dry, well-drained soil. It tolerates drought once it's established and is intolerant of shade, and deer will seldom damage it. Bees and butterflies will come to the flowers, and birds and mammals will consume the fruit and the pads. Prickly pear has bright yellow flowers from June to July. Each one only blooms for one day. And the pads, the edible pads and fruit that forms in the fall can be enjoyed by us as well. There are websites that describe how to prepare them. You just need to be aware of the thorns and the barbed bristles shown here. Those are referred to as glaucids. This is a very easy to grow plant. It will in fact root if you set the pads down in the ground, but you'll want to wear gloves when handling it and remove those prickly glaucids before cooking the pads if you intend to eat them. This is a great plant for those hot hell strips, for rock gardens, or water-wise gardens. Our next ground cover is green and gold, Chrysogonum virginianum. This is a mat-forming herbaceous perennial, again, 6 to 12 inches high. Now, this one is interesting. It can grow in full sun, part shade, or full shade. It's going to take dry to moist, well-drained soil. It will tolerate limited drought and even heavy shade. It provides nectar to bees and butterflies, and songbirds will eat its seeds. It has lovely velvety toothed leaves and composite starry daisy-like flowers. Now, I mentioned that it can take full sun. It actually prefers dappled shade, and it's going to need more moisture if you do grow it in full sun. You can remove the spent flowers to give it a best appearance. And be alert, overwatering or heavy mulching around the base can lead to root or crown rot. This can spread both by rhizomes and self-seeding, but is another plant that's easily controlled. It has multiple landscape uses. You can have it in woodland gardens or naturalistic settings. I grow it as a low-growing accent plant. It can also be used as an edging, and when it's missing its flowers, it's still very attractive as a ground cover. And finally, we'll take a look at a few grasses and sedges. The first is Indian grass, Sargastrum nutans. This is an upright clumping grass. It's what's referred to as a warm season grass. Just like our turf grasses, the native grasses are divided into warm season and cool season grasses. The warm season grasses will get rather a slow start. They'll put on a burst of growth in the summer months. Then they'll send up their flowers that are technically referred to as inflorescences. And then the seed heads will be retained through the winter into the spring months. And they have a very attractive architectural presence in the garden through the winter. This particular grass grows 3 to 5 feet high. It's going to prefer the conditions of our prairies, full sun, and a dry, well-drained soil. It will tolerate even rocky soil and air pollution. And the grasses and sedges in general are all deer resistant. This one provides a lot of wildlife support, pollen and nesting sites, seeds, cover, and nesting, and it's also a larval host. And here's how attractive it is for winter interest in the landscape. Indian grass begins its growth in the spring months as a clump of blue-green leaves. They're fairly wide, a half-inch wide, and as long as 2 feet long. And the foliage will turn yellow-orange, as you saw in that previous photo, in the fall. It develops plume-like seed heads above the foliage in September, and these persisting panicles even have a lovely metallic sheen. This is one of those plants that develops a very deep root system. And as I mentioned, it's going to prefer full sun and a leaner, a drier, less rich soil. It will actually tend to flop over if the soil is overly moist or overly rich, and it doesn't do well in shade. You'll want to cut this to the ground in early spring before the new growth appears. The grasses in general are very appealing. They will add movement and interesting light effects in your garden landscape. This one can be used as a vertical accent in borders. You can mass it in meadows as shown here, and it's a great addition on slopes to control erosion because of that deep root system. Our next grass is little bluestem, Schizocarium scoparium, another one of the warm season grasses. There were 4 grasses that grew in the tall grass Midwest prairies. Indian grass was one, little bluestem another, and switchgrass and big bluestem were the other 2. This one is shorter than Indian grass. It grows 2 to 4 feet tall. Again, prefers sun and dry conditions, intolerant of flooding. This grass attracts birds to its seeds, and it can provide cover for a variety of wildlife and is the larval host for multiple skippers. The spring growth is blue-green, giving its name, little blue stem. And the foliage will change through the seasons. In the fall, it turns this lovely bronze color, and that will last through the winter months. And here is a look at the lovely silvery white seed heads, absolutely beautiful when they're backlit by the sun. As I mentioned, this develops deep fibrous root system and is very drought resistant when established. It performs best in poor soils and readily will reseed. You'll cut this, as with the previous grass, to the ground in early spring. You can use it in meadow gardens combined with wildflowers. It's great for controlling erosion on slopes. It's also attractive as an accent plant in your beds and fabulous in xeriscapes. Another grass is pink muhly grass, Muhlenbergia capillaris, a third of our warm season grasses. This one has a different habit with a very rounded crown. It's 2 to 3 feet high and wide. This provides cover for birds and very attractive perching places for migrating butterflies. This is what the plant looks like right now, minus the flower heads. It has these glossy arching leaf blades. And you have to wait a while, but then you're rewarded in September to November. It develops these airy rosy red plumes. When they're backlit by the sun, they look almost like children's sparklers. And it retains its shape during the winter months. The foliage will turn a tawny color. This is a tough and very adaptable plant. The one thing you'll want to be careful about is avoiding winter wetness to prevent root rot. And you can cut back and propagate it by division in the spring. You can use this plant singly as an accent plant en masse in borders as shown here. And I've seen it also used as a screen. It gives, when backlit by the sun, almost a nebulous purplish haze. And it is salt tolerant, so you can use it at a beachfront. And I believe this is our final plant, Pennsylvania sedge, Carex pennsylvanica. This is referred to as a semi-evergreen sedge. I've found with our increasingly mild winters that it remains evergreen. It grows 6 to 12 inches high, and this is one that grows in part to full shade, dry shade. It tolerates drought and even heavy shade and is deer resistant. This is a larval host for Lepidoptera. These are the inflorescences, the flowers that appear in early April, and these are followed by tiny fruits. The leaves have an arching habit. They're very delicate and narrow. and the plant will spread by rhizomes to form loose colonies. This particular plant does not grow well from seed. It's better to grow it either from deep-rooted plugs or from potted plants. And this is one plant that's sometimes recommended as a lawn substitute for dry shade where grass will not grow. What you would do if you would like to grow it that way is to plant the plugs or the plants on 12-inch centers. And if you allow it to spread, it will spread by rhizomes. You'll cut it back. You don't really need to do a major amount of cutting, just thinning out any dead little tan leaflets in the spring. And this is also an excellent replacement for invasive Asian ground covers like liriope. You can use it as an underplanting for trees and shrubs, a ground cover in a forested area, or even, as I mentioned, a turf replacement. Now, this can't take a lot of foot traffic, but if you were to use it that way, I would suggest maybe using a path or foot stones to allow you for pedestrian traffic, and just allow it to grow densely around those stepping stones. Master Gardeners is an organization of volunteers that are trained by Virginia Cooperative Extension. And as Leslie mentioned at the outset, our particular group serves Arlington and Alexandria. And we do that in a number of different ways. We're sharing environmentally sound gardening practices from Virginia Tech and Virginia State University, first through our help desk. Right now, we're operating remotely, and you can use this email address, MG for Master Gardener, ARL for Arlington, ALEX for Alexandria @gmail.com. We normally have plant clinics. Those have been cut back at the moment, but we hope that those will be restored soon. Our particular unit has multiple demonstration gardens locally in Arlington and Alexandria, and you can learn about the locations of those on our website. They will demonstrate the use of many of the plants we've been talking about today and can provide inspiration for you in your landscaping. And of course, we have many classes in sustainable landscaping, urban agriculture, and best gardening practices that are all available on our website. Our unit of VCE is supported by a nonprofit group, Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia, and we sponsor the website, mgnv.org. And as Leslie mentioned, I have a long-running series of posts weekly on Facebook and daily on Instagram and Twitter. This I refer to as the Mystery Plant series. I have a post that shows a detail of a plant for you to try to identify, and then a whole collage of photos showing many details of the plant later that day. If you'd like to see native plants in situ, you can see them, as I mentioned, in our Master Gardener demonstration gardens. The upper left photo is from our Sunny Garden. There are also wonderful locations in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. National Arboretum. I mentioned specifically, I think, Fern Valley. Also, the outside portion of the U.S. Botanic Garden, the section referred to as our National Garden. Meadowlark Botanical Gardens is a great location, as is Green Spring. And the garden pictured in the center is the little pocket garden behind the Nature Conservancy headquarters in Arlington, Virginia. And finally, as far as questions on where to buy native plants, I refer you to the Plant Nova Natives website. They have a page that lists native-only sellers. For those of you locally, there are some right here in Northern Virginia, some a little further afield. And for any of you attending the session this morning from other states, I would refer you to the the plant societies websites to find out which plants are locally native. And I'll also try to include information about that in the document that I provide along with the recording of this presentation. Do we have any final questions, Nicole?
Yes, we have a handful, Elaine. So the first two are about black-eyed Susans, and one person is wondering about mold that appears on the stems of her black-eyed Susans and what the possible cause is of that.
Um, s- Sometimes when plants are a little densely planted, they may develop some of those foliar conditions. So as I mentioned, I think it was with the white wood aster, you may want to make sure that the plants are a little more evenly spaced so that the moisture won't be retained on the leaves. A couple of causes of that could be just some of these particularly heavy storm events that we're experiencing now with climate change. Also, you would want to avoid watering your plants with a sprinkler, particularly if you're doing it later in the day. If that moisture is retained on into the evening hours, some of those moldy conditions can develop. So watering either at the base of plants, these are, as I mentioned, of course, are fairly drought tolerant, but if you are watering them, try to water them either with a watering can at the base or use soaker hoses or drip irrigation rather than overhead watering.
Okay. And then our other black-eyed Susan question is about the specific cultivar gold sturm and whether that is a useful or beneficial pollinator.
Yes, that is, we have both the straight species and that particular cultivar at our Glen Carlin demonstration garden. And this brings up a good question. The main concern with cultivars is when in a woody plant, the foliage color has changed. If the foliage changes from green, which has chlorophyll in it, to other colors, like let's say red or purple, that the chemical makeup, the chemistry has been changed. Those leaves have anthocyanins rather than chlorophyll, and those plants will no longer serve as host plants for the Lepidoptera, the caterpillars. As far as herbaceous plants go, the main concern is when, as I mentioned with the echinacea, the flower shape has changed, as in the question of those double blooms. But also, if the flower color has changed, it may not be as attractive. The case of the gold sturm, the flower color is very similar. So we've seen an equal number of pollinators attracted to that particular plant.
Great. Another question we have is about sedges and ground covers and advice on new plantings and how these sedges and ground cover can become successfully well established.
Okay. I wonder if this question maybe has to do with clearing an area. And again, we have some recordings that talk about establishing gardens. Um, but I find that the ground covers do well if you're spacing them out maybe about a foot apart. I do this with both my sedges and with other low-going ground covers. I'm thinking, for example, of some Allegheny spurge that I just introduced in my garden. I plant those about a foot apart, and you'll certainly want to water them in well. Make sure that they're well established. Then what you can do is put a light coating of mulch around them. That's going to be protective in several ways. It will keep down any competing weeds. It will shade the roots and protect them both from the summer heat, allowing them to retain moisture. In the wintertime, it will protect them from heaving from the cold, and it will just allow them to get a good start. And then they will spread via the rhizomes and eventually fill in.
Sure. And Elaine, so we had two separate questions here. One was about establishing a new garden with the sedges or new lawn with the sedges and ground cover. And then a separate question about essentially replacing Liriope with sedges and other ground covers. And so would you say that the advice is generally the same, or would there be a difference if you're replacing a non-native grass with one of the grasses discussed here?
I would refer people to a presentation actually two presentations that I've given. One is specifically on ground covers for sun and shade. The second presentation had to do with replacing invasive plants with native plants. And I have a section specifically on replacing plants like liriope and English ivy and periwinkle. And I'll repeat some of that briefly here. If it's a very extensive area, you may find it challenging, either work-wise or because of your budget. You may find it difficult to replace the entirety of, let's say, a slope in one pass. So I would suggest beginning with one particular area, let's say the top, and working your way down. One excellent way to remove some of those deep-rooted plants like liriope, because it's referred to as lily turf. It has that very dense turf. I use a tool, a shovel with a jagged edge, and come in at a 45-degree angle, and I find that can help to lift up that turf. If you also come in at that 45-degree angle, you can get to the roots of invasive English ivy. And if you work as a team with one person using that tool and another actually taking the uppermost part of the plants, you can successfully roll it up more or less like a rug rather than breaking off individual pieces. The problem with those invasive plants is if any of those roots are retained, then the invasive plant is going to spring back up. So you want to clear that area of your invasive plant first. Then, as I've suggested, planting maybe about a foot apart your desired plants, watering well and mulching. And then in successive sessions or years, if you need to take a period of time, work your way down the slope and then removing those invasive plants and replacing them in the manner I've just described.
Great, thanks, Elaine. Another question is about prickly pears and whether they're edible, which I know you touched on in your presentation, and you mentioned cooking them. Are they edible if you just sort of cut them like straight from the plant?
If I recall, they can be eaten raw. I think they might be used maybe in salads, and I'll be happy to provide some more details on that along with the recording.
Okay, great, thank you. We have just a few more. Another one was about the best goldenrod for dry conditions.
Well, there are several goldenrods. I've mentioned this particular one. Actually, there are multiple goldenrods, and really, I think any of them are good for those dry conditions.
Okay. This one is looking for suggestions for a dry clay slope that is part shade. Currently has Dutch white clover, false strawberry, and some turf, but is also home to ground dwelling bees. They'd like to replace the slope with natives, but not damage the bees, and are wondering if you have any suggestions.
I would like to look a little further into how to treat a slope that has the bees. As this questioner is mentioning, we want to support our native bees. In fact, 70% of our native bees are ground dwelling bees. Now, as I understand it, they tend to prefer slopes that actually have some exposed soil. You may not want to, obviously for erosion concerns, you're not going to want to have really wide areas of exposed soil, but you may want to have at least some. And when I've attended other presentations that have talked about supporting native bees, they've suggested that if you do mulch, that you only put the lightest of layers of mulch, just so the soil isn't completely bare, and that will allow the bees to come up through. So if you've already got these existing plants, I think you're going to want to work pretty carefully so you're not disturbing them. And native bees can emerge in succession at different periods of time. So I might want to do a little research exactly what the timing would be for making that change. Um, you'll want to try to remove the existing plants as carefully as possible. And then maybe you might want to use plugs rather than large established potted plants when you're doing that replacement. So you're not going to be disturbing as much of the soil. Those are my off the top of my head thoughts, but I will be happy to look into this a little further, especially with regard to the question about not disturbing the bees.
Okay, and then just two more questions. One is about Pennsylvania sedge spreading by seed. Is that possible? Seems the questioner planted it in one area and sees little bits sprouting up in other places.
Okay, all of my reading has indicated that it doesn't tend to grow as prolifically if you're doing it from seed, but it can spread that way as well as via the rhizomes. That's the primary way that it spreads underground.
Okay. Okay, and then last question is about warm season grasses, the deeper rooted ones. How difficult or are they difficult to transport when mature or transplant when mature?
It can be a bit of a challenge. I have grown some switchgrass, and over a period of years, the basal growth that remains kind of dry and bristly, the tan growth that you can't really cut all the way down. You don't really want to cut it any further down than maybe about 6 inches. That base got rather wide. It was maybe 18 inches across. The best way to dig up one of those deep-rooted grasses, if you would like to move it, is to use a garden fork. Somehow with the tines, you can get down underneath and pry it up, and you can actually use the tines if you wanted to propagate it to separate into multiple sections. Now, my particular grasses hadn't grown their roots as deep as 7 or 10 feet. Those conditions are going to occur probably more in meadows and prairies, but it will really have a substantial root ball around it, and that's the best way I found to take it up and either transplant it or propagate it.
Sure. Well, that is everything. Elaine, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. I hope this gives you a little guidance on planting for dry areas of your yard. Look for the recording of this presentation on the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia website. I will be personally working on the captions for that, and it will appear along with my detailed responses to additional questions in the addendum document that will be posted at mgnv.org in about 2 weeks.